African businesses are going through a lot and are increasingly becoming targets for cyber attacks. And these attacks result in financial losses, breach of client trust, amongst others. And that's the focus of today's Tech Passion Special. I am Ibukun Bankole. Welcome to Tech Passion Special. Today, I have a guest with me, Chikodili Ude, all the way from HackTales Cybersecurity organization. And yes, she's the co-founder and executive director. Thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
All right, now, so let's just get straight into it. Securing your business against cyber attacks. Now, that's the conversation we're having today. About 60% of small businesses go into extinction because of cyber attacks, and that's a global statistics. Now, what exactly are the issues that could arise that could cause, cyber attacks? What are the trends, cyber attack trends that are out there now that, small businesses, even big businesses, should be aware of and, begin to think of addressing?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question. So in terms of trends that we see as a business, one of the top trends, I'll talk about the top three today. One of them being phishing and social engineering attacks. Now, attackers love to go after low-hanging fruits. And when you look at organization, the average SME has about 100 to 200 staff members, while the larger organizations, the enterprises, have well over 1,000 staff members. It's usually easier for them to go after the ones who are not technology savvy and then leverage them as a loophole to get into the organization. So, which is why one of the things we preach a lot is that you have to have employee awareness. You need to be sure that your employees actually know what is in the industry in terms of trends, especially as it applies to your specific industry, because the kind of threats that you have for the healthcare industry are sort of different from the financial sector, the telecom sector, and it's why it's very essential to train your staff. So the first being phishing, the second being ransomware attacks. So these attackers leverage phishing to deliver ransomware payloads, which is malicious software that demands ransom. So your staff members will probably just come to the office and then they try to log into their systems, and all they will find is a Bitcoin wallet saying your system has been locked, your files are encrypted. Send money, Bitcoins in this case, to this Bitcoin wallet. And in cases like that, operations are halted, businesses are unable to move forward for the day. Sometimes this can even run into months, weeks, and months, essentially. And the third being insider threat. Now, think of it this way: there are so many organizations that have staff members who handle very critical data. These organizations sometimes may not have the necessary controls in place to track what those users are doing. So you have a manager who has direct access to a database of a financial organization. How do you know if they're changing things at the background? We had a recent hack for Heritage Bank last year, and that was one of the things that was the major issue. So these kinds of attacks, we see them insider threat where there's an insider who is a malicious insider. Sometimes it could even be unsuspecting. The person might not be know that they are being used as a pawn. So it could be a malicious insider threat or unsuspecting insider threat. But we see this often because for attackers to get in and take advantage of your network, they need some form of access. And those are the three major attacks that we see across Africa.
Okay, so there's something striking that you said that caught my attention as regards, insider threats. The fact that even the staff might not know that he or she is being used. So considering that, and then you also say something as regards, training, there's need for small businesses and businesses in general to train their staff. Can you shed more light on that in terms of how businesses can begin to think of training their staff? Because if you use Nigeria as a case study, a lot of things are hard for business owners. Ease of doing business is not as expected. And so the thought of having to earmark funds again to ensure that your staff get trained and retrained is something that a lot of business owners might be rethinking and saying, am I sure I want to spend that much money? So, how important is that? And what are the ways that small business owners can begin to train their staff, particularly to ensure that they don't become tools in the hands of cyber criminals?
All right, thank you. So, in terms of training, it's in two parts. You must train and you must reinforce learning. So, training, you could use automated tools. We have a number of them, and at HackTales, we are partners to quite a number of world class tools. But what I would normally advise is have your own in house person who is responsible for training the team. So, if you're an enterprise, you might want to look at automating that training. But if you're a small business, you can have an organization come in maybe twice a year, so once every 6 months, to come and talk to yourself, just to create that awareness for them to get conversant with cybersecurity tactics, techniques, and what to look out for. And then on the reinforcing side of things, you have to launch phishing attacks. So you have a simulation in the environment that goes on such that you are pretending to be the attacker. So you see, oh, are people clicking it? And you can see feedback. In organizations that I've watched, I particularly haven't fallen for some of those things because sometimes you're working and you're too busy to even notice whether it's coming, it's a phishing attack and all of that, and then you just click on that and says, "Oh, you've been phished." So the whole idea is you train the users to be conscious of that. So by the time, even sometimes you feel like I'm bigger than this kind of attacks, and when it happens to you, you're like, okay, I probably need to pay more attention to my email, and that is the point you want to get your users to. That whenever they see an email, they take that split second to just look at the domain, look at the user who is sending it, and just pay a bit of attention to the link so that they don't fall prey. When you do that over and over again, you realize that your staff members become a lot more conscious. And for the cost side of things, we can use closed source tools. That's tools that are paid for. At the same time, there are open source tools that you can leverage to achieve these things. And that is one of the things we do. We help you with talents that may not be so cost effective, that will be very cost effective for you to be able to enforce security within the organization. So depending on your level, we can tailor solutions that work for you that would not, cost the business an arm and a leg.
All right. I mean, this is pretty interesting. Now, one thing that struck me is when you said you've been fished. So, which is really nice. So it makes people become more attentive. So, I mean, when sending emails, because I've also heard there was one time something was trending. I think earlier this year or late last year, where there was, I can't remember the site right now, one of these popular sites, but then of course it was not the original site, but then I think it was the .com or .net, just a very slight difference, and people were clicking. And yes, so I'm glad that you're raising this. I mean, I'm sure that not just business owners who would watch this, even regular staff members who would be watching Tech Passion Special would also begin to think along those lines, even if your company is not yet, considering to purchase any plan. I mean, just knowing that you need to check, and cross check again to ensure that you don't, I mean, put your company or yourself at risk of being attacked online. All right, now there's something you raised that has prompted like my next question, or I mean, you preempted my next question, which is on, I mean, there are diverse businesses across industries, and of course, what one company would need might not be what another would need, particularly also in terms of size. As much as we say small and medium scale businesses, they of course they vary. Some might have 200, some might have 150 staff members, and they would need different things. What are some of the strategies you employ to customize solutions for individuals, whether it's even a big or a small business owner, so they know that it's probably not as expensive or as draining as they think it is?
Okay, thank you for that. That is a very great question. So for when it comes to tailoring cyber different strategies for businesses, one of the first things that we will always do is to say, hey, when they come to meet us and say we're having attacks, we're having different things, or we just want to be secure as a business, we want to be sure we're doing the right things. The first thing I will always propose, sometimes even free, is let us help you with an audit. Now, a lot of the mistake that a lot of people make is that they just feel like, oh, I want endpoint security, I want email security, without even checking to know what is really important for the business at the time. Because every business is unique, every business process is unique, and what you think is important might not actually be what you should be focusing on. So what we do is have an audit. Now, when we do that audit, it's usually called a risk assessment audit. So when we do the
Okay.
audit, we then look at your entire organization, find out what is your business type, what approaches do you have in place, what are the processes you have on ground, what are your critical assets, where do you store your critical data, all of the necessary information to ensure that we are looking at the critical information that is sensitive to your organization, and then we build a plan that caters to protecting all of those critical assets. So once we do the risk assessment, we now have a risk treatment plan to say, hey, these are all of the areas that you should be focusing on. For some people, it's probably backup and recovery. If their business goes down, they have no backup. And they might have been saying to themselves, oh, we want endpoint security. But at the time, endpoint security is not what is important for them. Backup and recovery is. So if you don't do the audit, then you don't even know where your problem actually lies. So when we do that audit, we have a risk treatment plan. Then once we get a risk treatment plan, we analyze it and build technology controls to enforce security. Because the idea behind controls is they are there to enforce security. If you tell someone, don't use a weak password, they're probably not going to listen to you if there's no enforcement in place to say, hey, you can't sign in today until you change your password. If that's not there, people will just know mentally that, oh, they say we should not use weak passwords, but they're going to keep using weak passwords because that's a convenient thing to do, especially because human beings are creatures of habit. So we build around controls for the organization. If it's a small business, we can choose to go open source for an open source tool, or we do a manual approach. For some businesses, I would recommend an Excel sheet to manage certain things. For some enterprises, I would not recommend an Excel sheet. They must have an automated platform because of the volume of data. So, what is important
Okay.
to note is that whether you're a small business, a medium business, or an enterprise, there is room for you to build security structures in place. We will just work with what you have. Come as you are. That's what we always say. And security is not what you buy. I always make sure to say that to everyone. Security is not what you buy, it's how you put it in place. And it takes talented people to do that. You don't need to spend, a lot of people think security is so expensive, but that's not really the case. More often than not, it's how you put together the pillars, how you build it together. If you have some money to throw around, you can go all out. But if you don't, there are processes we can put in place to ensure that you are safe, secure, and your critical data is well protected. So once we do that, we put the controls in place, we draft policies, we educate your staff members, and we create incident response plans as well. Because when attacks happen or when something happens, we've seen cases in so many organizations, people don't even know what to do. If an attack happens now, what does everyone do? Nobody knows. They're just all looking at you. Every time I ask that question in maybe like a management training, everybody's always looking at me like, we have no idea what to do. So we also give you a proper incident response plan so that in the event that anything happens, you know the right authorities to call, you know who to defer to, you know how to manage those situations and get your business operations back up in the shortest time possible. So those are the things we do. And finally, we put monitoring processes in place so that you can monitor and constantly improve your processes and controls.
All right. So something interesting you said was about people are afraid of security, and maybe they're just scared that and think it's huge. And I was just thinking in my head that maybe they think it's the regular security with sirens and the mopoles and all of that. So maybe they think it's probably as expensive as having those kind of people, and maybe not. Anyway, so you mentioned a couple of things as regards. Let me quickly take a rain check. Backup recovery, endpoint recovery. So you said backup recovery, endpoint recovery. You said something about emails. I mean, maybe email protection. So that means there are different levels of even the cybersecurity. Can you just share a bit that maybe business owners can like bite-sized information that isn't business owners can easily understand, so they know that, oh, maybe you need to secure your emails, you need to secure your website, you need to breaking it down, maybe one to between one and three different types, so that people can have a grasp of how important it is to secure your data, your company, and from being attacked online.
All right, thank you. So for that bit, within cybersecurity, we have 7 layers. seven solid layers. The first being policies, procedures, and awareness. It's a layer on itself. So you must have policies in place. You must have procedures that you've laid down so that people can follow those procedures, and then you must train your staff. I already talked about that. The next layer is your perimeter network. So that's your external network. So in the external network, you have things like your websites, your email servers, you have your applications that are internet facing. So in the external network, we look to protect devices or systems or applications that are external to your internal network. Then we have the internal network, who is coming into your organization, your Wi-Fi, your internal resources, your systems, your servers.
Oh.
How are you protecting those things? Then from an internal network, we now have your endpoints, which is your systems, having antivirus on those systems, ensuring that you have DLP, data loss prevention, to ensure that if somebody tries to send out data that they shouldn't be sending out, you can nip it in the bud. You prevent them from sending sensitive data out of that system. So an example could be when you get into some organizations, maybe for instance the banks, your USB is automatically disabled. It's a DLP feature, data loss prevention feature. So you can't just plug in a
Oh,
USB
okay.
and take data out. So those are the kind of features that we have in place. Then from endpoints, you also have applications. You must protect applications as well. How are you testing those applications? It's not just about. I've seen cases where somebody will start a business, have an app, maybe a food app, something in the food sector or the healthcare sector, and they just launch. They're not doing constant vulnerability checks on those applications to find out if there are loopholes that attackers can take advantage of. So application security is also very important. And then finally, we have data security. How are you securing your databases? Are you monitoring activities that go on your database? If an admin changes a table or changes a figure, are you alerted about that? Those are the major areas. So application, data, systems, network, both internal and external, as well as your policies, procedures, and awareness.
That's pretty interesting. Policies, procedures, awareness. I mean, you said a lot of things about, antivirus. As you were saying these things, it just crossed my mind that actually even I need to beef up my knowledge and understanding of, cybersecurity, how I can even secure myself as a person. And that's a conversation we probably could even have later on. But now, moving away from that, in the event of like security breaches, you had raised something around that in just like maybe 30 seconds, so we can move to other questions. What can one do immediately there's a security breach?
Okay, so immediately as a security breach, you need to have some form of document that you leverage to report. So we usually call that a communication plan. So immediately there's a breach, who noticed the breach, the person has to report it. And there are metrics for reporting what happened, how did it happen, because the person who treats it needs to know. So that's why usually if there's a breach, if it's the IT team responsible, they immediately have to send a communications plan to maybe their manager, the IT manager. The IT manager then starts to work on it and try to decipher. So from there, usually within the organization, we would have defined levels. So maybe, for instance, level zero would be something that has to do with maybe availability issues. Level one can be something that has to do with confidentiality issues because within cybersecurity, there's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are different sets of security principles. So, what is affected? So, if it's an availability issue, you may need to escalate. So, I'll give an example. If it's an availability issue with maybe an application, yes, there's an IT manager, but there's an application team. So, you escalate to the application team to say, hey, this application is down. What do we need to do? So, there are chains of communication that must go along the line so that you can fix that issue. So, in the incident response plan, what we usually do is have your lines of escalation first and foremost, and then have a detailed set of procedures that must be followed if there's an attack. So, for instance, if an attack compromises consumer data, that's your user data, you have to, if in fact, your legal team would be part of that, your communications team will be part of that because now they have to escalate to the law, the legal side of things. Then they also have to write a communique in a public statement to the users to say, hey, we are dealing with this issue, this is how what. So there are different steps along the way, but what's most important is that you have to segment your types of attacks into different areas and then identify who is going to be handling what in the event that something happens. Because you can't think about the entire scenario ahead. But what you can do is to have communications plan. If this happens, escalate to this person. From there, we'll take it up.
All right, now, so from there, you're taking it up. That's really nice. Now to to my final question. Now, the reason I had to reiterate that is, I mean, processes. Many times we don't think of processes when we're working in organizations. Many times when as regards cybersecurity, I mean, in places I have worked in, I've not really had those. I've not really heard it, or maybe we haven't just been hacked, or we weren't hacked when several places I've worked. But then sometimes we don't get to hear of these kind of processes being in place. We're not even aware, and so it's ideal that this is going out so that people know that there has to be a chain of command because anything can happen. So proactiveness and preparing in the event of a cyber threat, which is a great one. Now to round off, we know there is AI now, and AI is pretty much like the king of technology that everybody's trying to use to ease up activities, processes. Now, how is HackTales staying abreast of cybersecurity trends and in ensuring to stand out and ensure that they provide the best service for businesses and probably even individuals across the continent, pretty much, if across the continent, and with the advent of AI, are you maximizing AI? Are you including AI? Or, I mean, there are other metrics at this time, and maybe in the future, there'll be a look into how AI can be integrated into the sector.
Okay, thank you for that. That AI, especially as it concerns Africa, is such a buzzword. And personally, yeah, while AI is very useful in a lot of areas, I still think that as a continent, we just are not at that point yet where we have so much data to really train our own models. But in terms of security, how do we keep abreast? Number one, we are very big on training. Now, training is a very big part of what we do. We train individuals, we train organizations, we train ourselves as well. So, in terms of up to date industry certifications, every member of our team, is made to go through the right trainings from the right sources. So, when it comes to, for instance, we want to deploy technologies, the OEMs train us. We go to the OEMs to get the right training so that we can replicate that to businesses across Africa. Now, aside from that, we also take our time to learn whatever new technologies are out there. So, in terms of AI, how does AI affect multiple industries? We take out courses, we take out, different types of trainings just to ensure that we can effectively support businesses. And we also look to leverage machine learning. Most of the tools we use are automated tools that already have AI ML enabled in them to make
Okay.
things, much better and much faster for our users. But yeah, as a continent, when we say AI, we use that word, we throw it around a lot, but we have to also realize that AI is artificial intelligence. So there has to be some level of intelligence for it to work with. And here,
Yes.
I think our goal at this point should really be how do we create systems that enable us to be able to leverage AI in much more context as we evolve as a community. Because in terms of digital transformation, we're still lacking behind when it comes to the Western world. So we need to still, create environments that enable people build things that can help us train data enough to get to that point where, AI now becomes part and parcel of what we do. But for now, we're just not at that stage yet.
All right, so I totally agree with you. The fact that we need to create systems that work for Africa and not just maybe maximize what we get from the Western world and not localize it to fit our own peculiarities. Thank you very much, Chikodili Day, the co-founder and executive director of HackTales Cybersecurity Organization. Thank you so much for being my guest today and shedding so much light on the importance of having cybersecurity in businesses and to ensure that they're protected and their data is protected and they don't have to experience cyber threats. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time. Hopefully, we can do a much longer session sometime in future.
Yes, hopefully soon enough. Of course, there's always, I mean, thank God that you're raising in now. So we'll have opportunities to do, other, of course, I'm sure there's a whole lot to unpack in the cybersecurity sector and the space. So there's a whole lot that people need to begin to know, even beyond businesses. So, I mean, it's a great conversation for us to have. All right, so that's all on Tech Fashion Special today. And as Chikodili said, You don't need to break the bank to begin to think of how to protect your company. So you can start small, start today, and make sure that you are protected, your business is protected, and to ensure that your business expands and not, fold up. My name is Ibukum Bankole. Join me again for another interesting edition of Tech Pression Special. Bye bye.